Okay. Welcome after lunch and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the short break. Our final panel of our forum, though certainly not the least because we have workshops afterwards, is dedicated to one of the most important and crucial health stakeholders in democracy, civil society. The panel focuses on the civil society engagement in reforms, which is a very important issue, and we are delighted that it is as diverse as it should be, with speakers representing various sectors and various countries. Our dear colleagues who will be participating remotely, welcome all of you, and much appreciation for your time and your contribution. Welcome, and I hope that next time we will see you in Tbilisi, because we will be continuing Good Governance Forum, and on 2025 I'm sure we will have the opportunity to see you in Tbilisi. And we have very good panelists on place, and I would like to introduce the coordinator of this panel, Program Manager at Civil Society Foundation, former Open Society Georgia Foundation, Vano Chikwadze, who will be moderating the panel. And thank you for agreeing to contribute to our forum. It is the contribution not only to us and to the forum, but to the audience which is very interested in this topic, and I think there will be lots of interaction on the topics discussed after the presentations, but I look forward to listening to the presentations first, and Vano, floor is yours, and please introduce the panelists. It's probably the most in number of panelists, the biggest number, and generally very balanced, in favor to women as again. So we have a very women involved conference this year, so thank you once again, and floor is yours. I won't take much time again.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. As it was already said, my name is Vano Chikwadze, and I'm representing Civil Society Foundation, which used to be called Open Society Georgia Foundation. It's my pleasure to be here. And as it was already mentioned, we will discuss about the engagement of the civil society in reforms, which is a very important, very crucial, and very timely topic, I believe. We have overall 7 panelists, and allow me to introduce each of them, very distinguished people in their fields. Starting from my left, this is Thea Genchadze. She is a public-private dialogue advisor at the Center for International Private Enterprise at USAID Economic Governance Program, and she used to work at the various projects, among them EU for Business, which was run by GIZ. She was dealing with the communication there, right? Then we have Nona Kordovanidze, and I think that most of us know her pretty well. She's a chairwoman of Georgian Young Lawyers Association, and she had been practicing and being there at the organization for a lot of years, I would say. And I think that she has a vast experience to tell us and to share with us her experience when it comes to the engagement of civil society in the reforming process. Let me move maybe to the screen, and let's start from Esther Hartay. She's a Hungarian lawyer, and she's working as a senior legal advisor with the European Center for Non-for-Profit Law. Then we have Ana Ravuelta Alonso. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly, but she's working now currently at UNAC, Coalition for Regional Coordination for Europe, as a researcher for independent reporting mechanism of the Open Government Partnership. Then we have Maka Meshveliani there, and she's a senior resident program coordinator at NDI, and she's now based in Montenegro, and she will share her experience and her observations from that country. Then we have Anna Isichko, and she's the author and co-author of a number of comparative legal studies in the fields of energy, transport, environmental protection, consumer protection, technical rules and standards. And last but not least, of course, we have Veronika Cretu, and she's the co-founder of the Innovative Governance Association. She's based now in Vienna, and she's also the co-chair of the Moldovan Permanent Dialogue Mechanism on Open Government. Without any ado, I'll just want to move now to our panelists, and maybe start from Esther. And there are actually 4 questions that I would like to pose to our panelists, and it would be great if they can elaborate no more than in 7 minutes, basically, to address these questions. One would be about the formats to discuss and to share us what are the formats in their respective countries that civil society participates when it comes to the planning and implementing reforms, and how effective those formats are. Are there just ad hoc basis, or these are like regular one? The second would be about the limits and challenges, and unfortunately it's emerging, at least here in our country, which civil society is facing when it comes to the engagement in reforms, and whether the operational space for the civil society organizations is shrinking. There are like much more possibility to engage in reforms, or it remains as it used to be. Third would be about if they can name at least one reforms where civil society was successful to get engaged and to shape the policy, and if there are any failures, and if they can elaborate on what were the reasons of the failures when civil society did not have an opportunity to engage in reforms. And last would be about, since all of these countries are now in the process of EU enlargement, and they are in the process of accession, it would be very interesting to hear the panelists' observations, what are how the EU accession process is actually used by the civil society organizations to push for the reforms. Maybe we can start from Thea, if you don't mind, and then we will move to Nona. And please, let's stick to 7-minute intervention and allow our guests here to put the questions and have the comments. Please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Vano. I hope everyone hears me. So, first of all, at the outset, I would like to actually thank the organizers of this wonderful event, IDFI, and the team. And it's a distinct pleasure for me to be part of this important platform, and it's really delightful to hear that it's already 5th edition of this forum. So I wish you success in the future, and I think you really tackle a very, very important mission, in terms of bringing all the major, practitioners and experts across the EU candidate countries together to discuss the issues that are mostly, kind of important for their EU membership process. So I'm wishing you success, and I'm again happy to be part of this discussion and this debate today. Particularly, I'm very happy about being part of this distinguished panel, because my heart currently lies in the support towards the civil society, and I represent the USAID Economic Governance Program, and for us, we run by a tagline, empowered by collaboration, and this is collaboration, and collaborative spirit is the main element, component of all our activities across the wide spectrum of the issues that we try to facilitate, we try to support. So let me just very, very briefly overview what our focus is in terms of our operations. So we have 3 very important dimensions. One is the governmental capacity building and supporting the governmental agencies, our partners, to actually drive the reform process, to develop the reforms that are credible. And the key element to ensuring this credibility is that the voices of civil society and private sector, because we also as an economic governance program are focused on bringing in the voices from business community. So it's important that for the credible reforms to be developed on our path to EU accession, it's important that these voices are heard. So our program is there to support, our counterparts and partners on both sides in this process. In terms of the reforms, these are the reforms that are key and instrumental for Georgia's EU integration process. Just to name the few, and we had this panel before in public procurement, so I'm really delighted that we have and the audience had the opportunity to hear from the agency representative about the great work that they have done, and we are particularly taking pride in being along with them in this process. So another important reform is water resource management reform, e-commerce reform, tourism reform. So we were really delighted to see that this year, I think, all our major reforms that have been developed, they have been signed into laws, and this is really a major highlight for the program, for the country, because this means that we are on the correct path for sustainability. Now it's important to turn this into sustainability and to have the follow-up secondary legislation also developed in line with these legal frameworks. Another important component and dimension is the civil society strengthening component, and this is the component that I am part of. And our focus within the program is to help the civil society and private sector players in terms of ensuring that they have strong voice in policymaking and lawmaking. And by doing this, we're using different tools, different instruments, from capacity building, from their organizational development and their organizational strengthening, to providing specific formats and dialogue formats, like public-private dialogue formats, for them to actually use and to apply, so that their opinions, their interests are taken into account whenever the policies and new pieces of legislation are developed. And the third component, which is also a key element of our program, is that as a policy program, we are helping also our partner USAID programs in terms of policy support. So there are different, a various spectrum of other reform areas which are not which do not directly fall under our thematic program, but nevertheless we extend our support to our sister USAID organizations in terms of providing advice on policy-related matters. So all these three dimensions, I should mention, that heavily rely on engagement of the civil society and the private sector. And quite frankly, I think we, as development partners and implementing partners for USAID particularly, are already at the stage when, as you know, there is a consensus, across the donor community that we should shift the power to local actors in terms of implementing specific reforms, right? So there is a lot of talking now going on, and there are specific decisions made about the locally led development. And we, as a USAID Economic Governance Program, also, of course, take this as pretty much as our guideline in terms of how we partner with local governmental or non-governmental actors. Now, the one particular focus, and Vano, you asked about the formats in which we see this engagement of civil society, and this is something that I deal with in my work, and I am overseeing all the grant activities that are fostering the culture of public-private dialogue in Georgia. You will, I think, we are among experts, so everyone will agree that public-private dialogue is key to implementation of the reforms that are credible, that are workable, that are transparent, that are inclusive. And this is a wonderful mechanism to ensure the participatory engagement of the civil society. But, we're still, at the, I think, initial stage, which is a very good thing, because, it's still a kind of exciting period when you have to start something new. But we are already seeing the results of the, let's say, 5-year work under this program of promoting PPD. We already can trace the positive dynamic in terms of establishing this culture within the public institutions, and also kind of fostering this understanding, the mindset on the civil society, private sector side, that there is a responsibility that they should also bear in this process. So as a USAID supported program, we are pretty much working with civil society on their capacity strengthening side, so that they have the skills, they have the competencies to engage in this dialogue in a way that is effective. that is kind of beneficial to the process itself. On the governmental side, of course, as you know, it's kind of a complex relationship that the government and civil society are currently having in Georgia. But it doesn't mean that we should not really put more and more effort in terms of bringing these voices together. Because at the end of the day, I think everyone recognizes, no matter their perspectives or visions, that the good policies, the policies that work, that the policies that bring specific benefits to the people of Georgia, and I'm talking about Georgia, obviously, are those which are evidence-based, which are based on facts, and which really reflect the voices of all those actors, who are influenced basically by the reforms. So this is about the formats, but I will be, glad to reply to any answers which our audience may have. In terms of just one quick point, in terms of the reforms, where we saw particularly successful engagement of the civil society, and I'll name water resource management reform, although those who have heard about the process, it took really a long time. It was like 10 years in making. However, we are here with the IDFI, and IDFI is our grantee, and we're happy to be implementing with them this wonderful mechanism, public-private dialogue mechanism, which traces the level and extent and the quality of public-private dialogue in elaboration of laws and other normative acts. So we are basically throughout this fifth year now in this project. And this mechanism is unique in terms of really showing you and demonstrating what is the tendency in terms of the use of this mechanism. So the recent report actually attested that this reform was one of the most successful ones in terms of ensuring that the civil society engagement was there and their opinions and recommendations were reflected.
Thank you, Thea. It's for your very interesting input, and I think that it would be also very interesting now to see how the civil society itself sees all this process. Let's look at it from this angle, and let's hear Georgian Young Lawyers Association voice, where you see the opportunities and where you see the challenges. The floor is yours, Nona. 7 minutes,
Thank
please.
you, Vano, and thanks IDFI for the opportunity of being with you today. I will speak in Georgia, if I may. რომ დავიწყოთ სამხალხო საზოგადოების ჩართულობასთან დაკავშირებით, პირველ რიგში, რა თქმა უნდა, მნიშვნელოვანია, რომ გარემოსთან დაკავშირებთ, რა პოლიტიკური გარემო არსებობს ქვეყანაში იმისთვის, რომ ჩართულობა იყოს უზრუნველყოფილი. ამაზე ვისაუბროთ და როგორია პოლიტიკური ნება ხელისუფლების იმისთვის, რომ რეფორმებში სამხალხო საზოგადოების ჩართულობა უზრუნველყოს. და რა გარემოებები და რა ვითარება, რა პოლიტიკური კონტექსტი გვაქვს დღეს ჩვენ საქართველოში. პოლიტიკური კონტექსტი, რომელიც დღეს საქართველოშია, რამდენიმე შრედ შეიძლება დავყოთ. ერთი მხრივ ჩვენ, როდესაც მივიღეთ კანდიდატის სტატუსი და ეს იყო ძალიან დიდი მიღწევა ქვეყნისთვის და მათ შორის ამ პროცესში სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ჩართულობა და როლი იყო ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანი, პოზიტიური როლი. ეს აჩენს შესაძლებლობებს ჩართულობის, იმიტომ რომ თლიანად ეს ანგარიში, რომელიც საქართველოზე მომზადდა, ის ნაბიჯები, რომელიც განისაზღვრა, არის თლიანად იმ სულისკვეთებით, რომ ეს პროცესები, ეს რეფორმები უნდა განხორციელდეს სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ორგანიზაციების ჩართულობით. მაგრამ და ეს ჩვენთვის არის, რა თქმა უნდა, შესაძლებლობა ამ პროცესებში მონაწილეობის და ჩვენ როდესაც კანდიდატის სტატუსს მხარს ვუჭერდით, მიუხედავად იმისა, რომ ხედავდით, რომ ქვეყანას ბევრი მიმართულებით ჯერ ბევრი აქვს კიდე გასაკეთებელი, ამას იმიტომ ვაკეთებდით პირველ რიგში, რომ ეს ჩვენთვის იქნებოდა შესაძლებლობა, რომ ქვეყანა წინ წავიდეს და რეფორმები გაატაროს. ამ შესაძლებლობას ჩვენ დღესაც ვხედავთ, რომ ეს ასეა და ეს არის ერთგვარი ინსტრუმენტი ჩვენთვის, ვაიძულოთ სახელმწიფო გაატაროს მნიშვნელოვანი რეფორმები. მაგრამ მეორე მხრივ რა გამოწვევებს ვხედავთ? საქართველოში სამწუხაროდ თანდათან უფრო და უფრო ინტენსიური ხდება სამოქალაქო სივრცის შეზღუდვის ტენდენციები და ეს არ არის ახალი ამბავი, ბევრმა ამ დარბაზში იცის რომ შარშან, როდესაც მარტის მოვლენები ხდებოდა, ერთ-ერთი ინიციატივა უკავშირდებოდა იმას, რომ სახელმწიფოს მიეღო სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების შეზღუდვისთვის აქტი, შესაბამის კანონი უცხო ქვეყნის, ეგრეთ წოდებული უცხო ქვეყნის აგენტების შესახებ. და ამ კანონის გახმობა შესაძლებელი გახდა მხოლოდ ძალიან მასშტაბური პროტესტის, საზოგადოების პროტესტის შედეგად. მაგრამ ამის მიუხედავად ის რიტორიკა, რომელიც სახელმწიფოს ჰქონდა კანონის ინიცირების დროს, ის გულისხმობ მმართველ გუნდს გაგრძელდა და ჩვენ ყოველდღიურად ვხედავთ თავდასხმებს სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების აქტივისტების, ორგანიზაციების წინააღმდეგ, მათ შორის დღესაც ერთ-ერთი ასეთი განცხადება გაკეთდა პარლამენტის თავმჯდომარის მხრიდან, როდესაც ცდილობენ ყველა ის საქმიანობა, რომელსაც არასამთავრობო ორგანიზაციები აკეთებენ, watchdog ორგანიზაციები აკეთებენ, იყოს წარმოჩენილი ისე, რომ თითქოს ეს სახელმწიფოს ინტერესებს აზიანებს, როდესაც ყველაფერი პირიქით არის. ამიტომ, როდესაც ესეთ გარემოში გიწევს საქმიანობა, ძალიან ძნელია, რომ ამავდროულად არსებობდეს ის სივრცეები, სადაც შესაძლებლობა გექნება რეფორმების განხორციელებაში რაიმე წვლილი პოზიტიური შეიტანო და ამის ერთ-ერთი მაგალითი შემიძლია გავიხსენო, როდესაც წინა გასულ კვირაში საქართველოს პარლამენტში შეიქმნა სამუშაო ფორმატი, სადაც იგეგმებოდა მცხრანაბიჯის განხილვა. ამ ფორმატში მოწვეულები იყვნენ ოპოზიციის წარმომადგენლები, ქართული ოცნების წარმომადგენლები და სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების მხოლოდ მცირე ნაწილი. ამის ახსნა იყო ის, რომ ქართული ოცნება ამბობს, რომ ის ითანამშრომლებს სამოქალაქო საზოგადოებასთან მხოლოდ ეროვნული პლატფორმა, ხო? ესე ეროვნული აღმოსავლეთ პარტნიორობის სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ეროვნულ პლატფორმის წევრ ორგანიზაციებთან და ბევრი ორგანიზაცია საქართველოში არ არის საერთოდ ამ პლატფორმის წევრი, მათ შორის ახალგაზრდა იურისტთა ასოციაცია აღარ არის ამ პლატფორმის წევრი. პლატფორმის წევრი უამრავი სხვა სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების წარმომადგენელი არ არის და ეს არ შეიძლება სახელმწიფოს მხრიდან მოხდეს ინსტრუმენტალიზება ამ პლატფორმის და გამოყენება ისე, რომ თითქოს მხოლოდ ამ ფორმით ჩართულობაა შესაძლებელი რეფორმების პროცესში. ეს არც სამართლიანია, არ არის ეს სწორი მიდგომა სახელმწიფოს მხრიდან და ეს არის დამაზიანებელი იმ ნაბიჯების შესრულების პროცესში, რომელიც საქართველოს განესაზღვრა. ამიტომ ჩვენ ამის საპასუხოდ, როდესაც მეორე მხრივ ისმენდით, რომ ეს კარი ყველასთვის ღიაა და შეგვიძლია ჩვენი მოსაზრებები წარვადგინოთ, ჩვენ მივმართეთ პარლამენტის თავმჯდომარეს, კომიტეტის ხელმძღვანელს და ვთხოვეთ, რომ ჩვენ ყოფილიყავით მიწვეული ამ პროცესში და ყოფილიყავით ჩართული სამუშაო ფორმატებში. თუმცა ამის საპასუხოდ მივიღეთ ის, რომ ეს დამატებით გახდა მათი მხრიდან ჩვენი კრიტიკის საფუძველი და წარმოჩენა ისე, რომ თითქოს ჩვენ ამ ჩართულობის მოთხოვნით ხელს უშლიდით მათ მუშაობას და რაიმე ფორმით ვაზიანებდით ამ პროცესს, რაც რა თქმა უნდა არის არალოგიკური, როდესაც ითხოვ თანამშრომლობას, ეს არ შეიძლება იყოს დამაზიანებელი რაიმე ფორმით, რაიმე პროცესების და ასეთ სიტუაციაში რა თქმა უნდა ძალიან ცოტა შესაძლებლობა რომ რაიმე წვრილი კონდეს რეფორმების ჩართულობა იყოს მაღალი და კონდეს მას რაღაცა მნიშვნელობა და სამწუხაროდ, როდესაც ჩართულებიც ვიყავით, მაშინაც დავინახეთ, რომ როდესაც საქმე ეხება მნიშვნელოვან პოლიტიკურად მნიშვნელოვან საკითხებს, როგორც არის მაგალითად სასამართლოს რეფორმა, ხელისუფლების მზაობა, რომ გაითვალისწინოს რეკომენდაციები არის ძალიან დაბალი და შარშანდელმა მოვლენებმა ეს დაადასტურა, როდესაც ჩვენი რეკომენდაციების მნიშვნელოვანი ნაწილი არ იყო გაზიარებული. საბოლოო ჯამში ჩვენ მივიღეთ რეფორმა, რომელიც მხოლოდ ტექნიკურად რაღაცებს აუმჯობესებდა კანონმდებლობაში და ეს არ იყო სისტემური მიდგომა სასამართლო რეფორმის გასატარებლად და ამის საპასუხოდ ვენეციის კომისიის, ასევე ევროკომისიის ანგარიშებში ეს ნათლად გამოჩნდა, რომ სახელმწიფოს ძალიან ბევრი რამ აქვს გასაკეთებელი სასამართლოს მიმართულებით, დრო ძალიან ხო არ გადავაცილე, თუმცა არის ხოლმე რაღაც პოზიტიური თანამშრომლობის მაგალითებიც და მინდა ამაზეც რამდენიმე სიტყვით თქვა. ეს შესაძლებლობები არის მაშინ, როდესაც საკითხი ნაკლებ პოლიტიკურია და მაგალითად ჩვენ ესეთი პოზიტიური გამოცდილება გქონდა, როდესაც გქონდა რეკომენდაციები წარდგენილი საპარლამენტო ზედამხედველობის მექანიზმების გაუმჯობესებასთან დაკავშირებით და რაღაც პროცედურების გამართვასთან დაკავშირებით. აქ შედარებით მეტი იყო შესაძლებლობა იმისა, რომ ჩვენი რეკომენდაციები ასახულიყო კანონმდებლობაში. ასევე, როდესაც 12 პუნქტიან გეგმაში ერთ-ერთი პუნქტი მოიცავდა ადამიანის უფლებათა ევროპული სასამართლოს გადაწყვეტილებების ასახვას ეროვნულ კანონმდებლობაში და მის გამოყენების გაზრდას ჩვენს ეროვნულ სისტემებში, ამ შემთხვევაშიც ძალიან ღია იყო პროცესი, ჩართულობა შესაძლებლობაც მაღალი იყო და რეკომენდაციების ძალიან დიდი წილი გაიზიარეს. ამიტომ ეს რის თქმის საფუძველს გვაძლევს, რომ სახელმწიფო მზად არის ითანამშრომლოს სამოქალაქო სექტორთან, მაშინ, როდესაც ეს საკითხი ნაკლებ პოლიტიზირებულია, ნაკლებ პოლიტიკური დატვირთვა ნაკლები აქვს, მაგრამ მაშინ, როდესაც სისტემურ რეფორმებს ეხება ისეთს, როგორიც არის სასამართლო, ისეთი როგორც არის საარჩევნო სისტემები, ამ შემთხვევაში შესაძლებლობა ჩართულობის არის ლიმიტირებული და ფორმალური. ამიტომ ეს ფიქრობ, რომ დამაზიანებელი იქნება ქვეყნისთვის იმ გზაზე, რომელიც მან აირჩია, რომ უნდა გაიაროს და რა თქმა უნდა, უმჯობესია, რომ ეს შესაძლებლობები გაიხსნას ყველასთვის, ისე როგორც ამას ითვალისწინებს ევროკომისიის რეკომენდაციები და თვითონ ანგარიშის სულისკვეთება.
I'm speaking in English because of the working language, and it was recommended by our organizer, by the organizers of this event to do it like that. So let's move to our participants who are online, and maybe we start from Esther, since we already had identified these core topics and the questions. It would be very interesting to also to hear your input and your opinion to addressing those 4 questions which I put forward at the beginning of our panel. Please, floor is yours, and let's stick to this 7-minute time limit.
Thank you, Vano, colleagues from IDFI, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a real pleasure to join the event together with such a great panel of speakers, even if only virtually. I'm representing the European Center for Not-for-Profit Law, which has 20 years of experience advocating for better legal and policy environment for civil society in Europe and beyond. Effective participation has several building blocks. Let me focus on 3. As Nona also highlighted, the first is independent civil society. When we look at participation, we also need to see the preconditions of participation, which is the ability of civil society organizations to operate, to gather resources, to channel their voices of the members, and freely express their opinion on issues that are core to their mission. Such an enabling environment makes it possible for civil society to independently monitor and engage in public affairs. The second building block is good processes in place. It's important to have clear safeguards and good processes in place that allows for input of various stages of the decision making. The process must be inclusive and mobilize a diverse and representative range of stakeholders, including marginalized groups, women, and youth. And most importantly, it must have an impact. People need to know whether and how their contribution was recognized in the final policies and decisions. It's crucial to build trust and ownership. And the third component is good tools. If there is a political will, there are countless ways to engage people and organize civil society. Technology brought a whole new dimension for participation. We just published a piece of research on this last year. Today, we can come up with proposals, meet, design map-based surveys, contribute to participatory budgeting through digital participation platforms such as Decidim, Mapshina, and many others. State and local institutions can use gamification and serious games to enhance participation and make it more informative and inclusive. They use social media to gain public opinion, distribute information, and foster participation in planning initiatives. But human interaction and in-person meetings remain important, such as permanent working groups and roundtables, citizens panels, and their combination with online tools. While the participation tools are expanding globally, the space for civil society and their engagement in many countries is restricted by measures that aim to promote transparency, regulate lobbying, and prevent foreign influence. We're also worried about the chilling effect of the recently proposed EU Defense of Democracy package on civil society participation inside and outside of the EU too. But when it comes to the power of people and civil society to push back, we don't need to go far. The prevention of the adoption of the foreign agent law in Georgia can serve as a hope and inspiration for civil society in other countries, and that change is indeed possible. ISINAT prepared a briefer collecting the key arguments and strategies civil society used to contest the law. Having an in-depth analysis, the right narrative, continuous monitoring, coordination, and the engagement of local organizations, large-scale social media campaign humanizing the sector are some of the elements of success. Another example for civil society advocacy is related to the EU AI Act. Following continued 2 years advocacy by Siena and partners in the European Digital Rights Coalition, the EU agreed to include in the regulation an obligation for deployers of high-risk AI systems to assess the system's impact on fundamental rights before putting it into place. We were also initially successful at convincing the European Parliament not to include a blanket exemption on AI systems for national security. But we faced opposition from the Council, and ultimately this blanket exemption was included in this act. This goes to show that we may have overlooked the need to conduct more advocacy at the state level and engage better civil society partners to do so. The EU accession, as my colleagues also said, opens new opportunities for people and civil society organizations to raise their voice and shape policies on issues that affect their lives. It is important to have formal processes in place to participate in EU negotiation discussions. Still, even in countries, certain EU countries where there is a solid system for participation in policymaking at the national level, the same is missing or less structure for engagement in EU policies and processes. So it's important to invest in this area, and so there are some good practices already, such as monthly meetings organized to coordinate with civil society organizations on national positions related to EU policies like in Latvia. And you can find these examples and others in our brief on this topic. Another opportunity is the EU rule of law mechanism. The European Commission is launching an ad hoc mechanism for the rule of law dialogue and reporting cycle for countries that have applied to join the EU and are currently granted the candidate status. Those candidate countries that are deemed to have made good progress on issues related to the 4 rule of law pillars will be offered the opportunity to engage in the similar annual cycle with final reports and specific recommendations for reform. So to sum up, an enabling environment, political will, good processes, and diverse tools are needed for an effective participation in decision-making, both in the local issues and during EU negotiation discussions. And civil society can provide valuable input to achieve this. I pause here and I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Esther. Maybe we, before summing up, of course, we will make it at the end of the panel, definitely, but let's listen to other panelists and let's turn to Ana Revuelta Alonso. Floor is yours, and if you can address those questions that we elaborated, please.
Well, thank you very much, Vano, and thank you to IDFI for convening this timely forum and for inviting me. I also celebrate actually that we have this specific final session to highlight the role of civil society in good governance, and also that we have so many women around the table for once. I represent the ONCA coalition, and I would like to bring here an international perspective on the contribution of civil society to anti-corruption efforts. So for those who don't know us, the ONCA coalition is a global civil society network that counts today over 350, actually close to 400 civil society organizations worldwide. And about a third of them are based in Europe, including in the Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership countries, where there is a vibrant civil society and a diverse, strong, and capable range of organizations that bring solid expertise and fresh approaches to fighting corruption. The focus of our work is to advance the implementation and the monitoring of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and to do so with transparency and meaningful civil society participation at the country, regional, and global levels. And for a reason, the UNCAC is the most universal and legally binding agreement that we have to deter corruption. So how do we contribute and where are we having impact? There are many ways in which civil society organizations inspire and push for political integrity and policy reforms in each country. The parallel reports on UNCAC implementation elaborated by UNCAC coalition members and partners offer a unique perspective on the progress and the shortcomings of national anti-corruption reforms, and they can be used to activate the dialogue with governments for further improvements. So we've recently published, you can find them on our website, recent reports for Armenia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, Montenegro, Serbia, or Ukraine. In the previous session, we heard about beneficial ownership, transparency, and public procurement integrity. And those are certainly two areas where civil society organizations are creating tools and promoting standards adopted by a growing number of countries, including some of those mentioned here. And just to mention two more ways through which civil society organizations are having impact at country or at local level. Investigative reporting and research have led prosecutors in Bosnia and Herzegovina to bring charges against tax inspectors for alleged bribery or for abuse of their position, or led to disciplinary procedures against judges and prosecutors in Kosovo. And monitoring publicly accessible information, such as asset declarations and cross-checking it with other sources, enable civil society organizations in Romania or in Montenegro to raise red flags when they detect discrepancies or potential conflicts of interest and report them to anti-corruption authorities. But as I said, we also act jointly to improve the global institutions and global practices. So here, two recent successes I would like to mention, success stories. One, the first resolution in the United Nations to protect whistleblowers was adopted by the UNCAC states parties a month ago. It was influenced by the work of civil society organizations, among others from Serbia, and represents a major success in the global advocacy of our network. And of course, we not only contributed to this resolution, but to many more that were adopted at the conference. And two, over 60 states have committed already to be more transparent and inclusive in their UNCAC reviews by adhering to the UNCAC Coalition Transparency Pledge and to our joint call with the UK government and the Open Government Partnership. These states have committed to raising the standards and involve civil society in the UNCAC implementation review in their countries and to disclose the review report in full. But yet, as we are mentioning here, there is much untapped potential in collaborating with civil society. And this is so because the space for civil society is weakened and its work is put at risk due to serious challenges. I want to mention only a few that we are seeing in the region and, of course, beyond. Difficult access to information, lack of support by governments, discredit of civil society organizations in some cases, the political control of public institutions, which leads to citizens' distrust in the judicial system and the system as a whole, and an increasingly polarized political environment in which misinformation and disinformation campaigns represent an added risk, especially in this year of many electoral dates. Against this background, what can we do? In my opinion, we have to come back to the basics. So that is living up to the letter and the spirit of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Article 13 of the UNCAC highlights the crucial role of civil society by calling states to involve non-state actors in anti-corruption efforts and to ensure they have access to the necessary information. And this commitment was renewed in the last conference of the states parties that was held in December in Atlanta, the US. The Atlanta Declaration, adopted by 190 states parties to the UNCAC, emphasized government's responsibility to respect, to protect, and to support civil society. So along that line, I want to conclude with three very concrete proposals to the governments in the region for a meaningful collaboration with civil society in anti-corruption efforts. The first one would be to sign and to comply with the UNCAC Coalition Transparency Pledge. I mentioned that about 60 states have committed to raise the standards for transparency and participation, but actually only 3 countries from Eastern Europe have so far signed the Transparency Pledge. The second is organize public discussions on the recommendations received in UNCAC reviews and take action now to follow up on the implementation and monitoring of these recommendations with the active involvement of civil society. And the third and last proposal is to use as well the opportunities offered by other international platforms, such as the EU accession process, which clearly encourages authorities to engage more with civil society, and the Open Government Partnership, because, of course, including transparency and anti-corruption commitments in those OGP action plans and involve civil society in implementing and monitoring these commitments will lead to better outcomes. So I will leave it here. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Anna, thank you so much. It was very interesting to hear all these successful reforms which took civil society on board. and also those experience of failures, if I may put it, and also those three recommendations which you elaborated. This is very interesting. Let's move now to Maka Meshveliani. As I mentioned, she is based in Montenegro, and considering the experience of Montenegro, which is ahead of our country, Georgia, when it comes to the EU accession process, I think that it would be very interesting to hear your voice and your observations. Maka, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vano. Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here connecting from Podgorica, Montenegro. And obviously, I wish I was there together in person, but hopefully next time. I represent National Democratic Institute, NDI, currently, as I said and mentioned, based in Montenegro. And NDI has been working for democracy globally, including in my home country, Georgia, for over 40 years now. In my short intervention, I would like to highlight the role of the civil society in advancing the good governance reforms in Montenegro, which, as Vano has noted, is ahead of Georgia when it comes to the length of the duration of the negotiation processes, but also some of the technical requirements. And the role of the civil society has been, of course, critical in helping the country make progress towards the full membership of the European Union. Just a little reminder, because we are not in the Western Balkan region currently, so just a little historical overview and the basic facts about the country. Montenegro is a small country in the Western Balkan region with a beautiful Adriatic coastline and magnificent mountains. Those who have not been there, I would highly, highly recommend a visit, even if it's a short visit. It's a small country, population only 620,000 people, and that often leaves an impression that anything should and can be done overnight. However, as we all know, building democratic processes and strong and independent institutions do take time, and it's a process. So you cannot really take shortcuts when it comes to democracy development, and we will see that in a few minutes. To set the context for the current good governance reforms in Montenegro, just a few facts to continue with that. Montenegro regained independence in 2006 and started the negotiation process with the European Union in 2012. It became a NATO member in 2017, soon after the coup attempt allegedly supported by Russia. The investigation is still ongoing, so no conclusive observations here. Montenegro is considered to be transitional hybrid regime according to Freedom House. And among Georgia and Armenia, it remains among the top 3 leaders in the Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International for the Eastern Europe and Central Asia region. Montenegro was ruled by the single majority one party for 30 years, and in 2020, the peaceful transfer of power happened through the landmark parliamentary elections. Since fall 2020 and the elections, the country has had 2 caretaker governments and 3 national electoral cycles in 2023, only last year. The current government is composed, it's a coalition government, and it was put in place in November last year. And all of this development since 2020 has contributed to the lack of political stability, which has not really created a thriving environment for good governance reforms. And the progress for the EU accession has been largely stalled. When it comes to the specifics of the EU accession, to this date, there are 33 negotiating chapters that have been opened, and only 3 of them have been provisionally closed. Overall progress in the accession negotiations depends on the progress in the area of rule of law, according to the European Commission reports. And if the chapters 23 and 24, which are about rule of law, if they're not closed, the new negotiation chapters will not be opened. And judicial reform is one of the critical areas under the rule of law chapters that needs to be reformed. NDI, National Democratic Institute, was supporting Montenegro's path towards independence and democratic processes in 2000s. With a permanent presence closing in 2011. USAID, CEDA, SDC, all graduated Montenegro from the direct democracy assistance at around the same time. However, in 2020, the US government saw the need for additional democracy support, and NDI has been working with the parliament as well as government and civil society organizations ever since. The vibrant and diverse civil society in Montenegro has been actively relying on the EU accession path to advocate for needed reforms. And one of the notable tools that have been utilized for this advocacy agenda over the past decade or so has been the Open Government Partnership, the OGP umbrella. Montenegro has had its ups and downs when it comes to the OGP process and OGP history. It was one of the first countries that joined the platform back in 2012, and it has implemented the 3 national action plans ever since. In the beginning, there was a big enthusiasm towards the initiative. It was spearheaded by under the leadership of the Prime Minister at the time. However, after the implementation of the first national action plan, the country OGP progress was stalled, and that was followed by a few years of inactivity with the OGP. Formally, the country was held or declared as inactive, as people from OGP who are in the room would remember and attest. And currently, Montenegro actually a few years ago, Montenegro found a renewed enthusiasm for OGP, and it has adopted 2 more national action plans. The current one is focusing on 5 areas, which is public participation, open data, access to information, whistleblower protection, fiscal transparency, and open government at the local level. However, independent reporting mechanism has not assessed the action plan as ambitious enough, and it has noted a number of recommendations for improvement, including in the areas related to the anti-corruption reforms. When it comes to the engagement of the civil society and utilization of OGP as a mechanism to advance the EU accession reforms, the path also has been a little bit rocky. There are some institutional and legal frameworks that actually prevent the meaningful participation of the civil society in the policymaking processes. Just as an example, the status of CSOs that are involved in the government initiated working groups. Sometimes they're considered to be the state employees, and they're faced with the same level of scrutiny, for example, with the asset disclosures, filling out asset declarations annually and publishing them, as some of the state officials. That even if their engagement with the working groups is not remunerated, so it's completely on a voluntary basis, and they're faced with the same level of scrutiny, and also that limits some of their participation in the EU-funded projects. So that has contributed to some criticism from civil society. But more importantly, I would say that the lack of trust from the civil society towards the governments has contributed to the lack of engagement in the formal processes that are initiated by the government. As an example, around the Open Government Partnership, for example, the Ministry of Public Administration had to announce a public call 7 times to recruit 9 civil society members for the multi-stakeholder forum. And not all ministries and not all public institutions are that persistent. So you have a number of working groups that do not have any civil society organizations because the announcements are declaratory. They're published on the website, and there is not much interest from CSOs. And due to the past history with the failed reforms, there is not a lot of trust towards, as I said, towards the state institutions, and also the lack of stability, political stability, does not give the confidence to the well-established organizations to dedicate their time and efforts with the governments if they expect that the government might be voted out. And since 2020, there have been 2 caretaker governments with very little progress, many would say, made. So part of NDA's mandate is to actually utilize the existing tools, for example, OGP, to help build that trust between the government and civil society organizations, and, for example, encourage the meaningful feedback, reasoned response, actually actually reaches to the civil society organizations.
I'm sorry, I'm very cautious about the time. If you can.
Of course, yes, I'm wrapping up. So it's important not to get lost in technicalities and important tools such as, for example, reasoned response, which is one of the requirements for OGP, is actually used in a way that addresses the issues on the ground, such as the build trust between the government and civil society organizations. I will pause here and hopefully allow some time for questions and answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It was very interesting to hear the Montenegro's experience on the way of EU accession and all these reforms, which is supposed to take place in that beautiful country. We have two more speakers here on the panel, and one of them is Anna Isichko. She comes from Ukraine, from the country which is at war, but at the same time it tries to push and deliver on reforms. Anna, if you can share your experience of Ukraine to be at war at the same time and deliver on reforms. If you can elaborate on that for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Vano, for giving the floor to me. And first of all, I wanted to thank the audience and the esteemed speakers of this panel. I'm happy and honored, truly honored to be here today and to share the experience and best practice of Ukrainian civil society here. Yes, thank you for reminding the audience and all of us one more time that our main task of Ukraine currently is to win the war. And while Ukraine is fighting for the democracy in the whole European region and the world, we still continue conducting our successful reforms. There are some reforms that are still in process, but it's always worth mentioning that we are doing this not despite the war, but during the war, and we are not going to stop any kind of speed that we've taken in previous decades. I represent the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law. It is a think tank that is in the area of supporting reforms in Ukraine for 19 years already. And this is actually the thing that allows me to talk on really successful reforms. One of them is media reform. I understand that most of you would be eager to hear about anti-corruption reform. It's actually truly good example of what can be done, that even during the war, civil society helps to ensure that Ukraine is no longer in a blacklist of Grecors. So the institutions that fight corruption are really strong in Ukraine, and that is kind of one of the best examples of continuing cohesion and cooperation between public authorities and civil society. But it's not the only reform that is successful and should be mentioned here. When we speak about fighting the propaganda of Russian Federation, it is possible in Ukraine today only due to the successful media reform, which was here during 10 years so far, and finally media law was already implemented, and it ensures that our broadcasters at all levels, local, regional and national, are resilient enough to provide reliable data and information both at national and international level. I'd rather say also about the successful decentralization and multi-level governance reform, which actually allowed our society to become more resilient and more prepared in the event of fully scaled invasion, because it's strong local authorities and communities which make us stronger at national level and able to be more resilient to any kind of challenges. As to the role of civil society in whole, I wanted to just cite and quote the wording of the Ukraine report 2023, which was issued by the European Committee, and it says that civil society remains a key element of Ukrainian democracy, maintaining social bonds and fabrics and contributing to the resilience of society at large. So Ukraine civil society is actually very vibrant, and it's engaged in reform processes from the very date of the independence from Soviet Union. So from that moment, we provide the active involvement in all kinds of processes in Ukraine. We are known as a country where each decade there is a revolution. Now this tradition is kind of broken because all our strengths at all levels of all sectors are united in struggle against our only enemy. Therefore, during the war, we have a martial law which had applied some kind of restrictions which are natural during the war, but still, even during martial law, we are the part of Ukrainian economy, 1/3 part of Ukrainian economy that influences the decision making in Ukraine at all levels. We have a fully fledged cooperation with the government and the parliament, and this can be proven that not only at the level of the documents, we've got more than 20 various policies which ensure the access of civil society organization to decision making, but also we've got the real proof. We've got so many legislative acts and draft laws that are being elaborated only and inclusively with the participation with the civil society. Currently, there are some kind of processes that can be unseen, but they are still important, like the legislation on aimed at regulating lobbyist activity, which one of the requirements of European integration. So here, civil society is also participating in consultations with the Parliament in order to ensure that the recommendation of the European Commission is followed, and that no harm and no administrative burden is created for civil society organizations, just to differentiate between lobbyists and advocacy activity which is performed by civil societies. As to the other questions, what could be named actually about the limits and challenges that civil society faces here. About the main challenge and the main thing that makes us more resilient is war conditions. So here we know that it's kind of stimulated Ukrainian civil society to flourish in volunteering activity, and it is another success story that during war, Parliament and government and civil society prepared a new legislative framework for volunteering and civic activists and organizations involving volunteers to be in more favorable conditions to be able to continue their activity. As for the civil society involvement in the European integration, it cannot be underestimated or overestimated. Civil society is just here from the very beginning. We, as a part of the force that is providing expertise and checking, monitoring the conformity of Ukrainian legislation with the acquis communautaire. As to the European integration in whole, it is kind of very quick process here. We know that on 5th day of the fully fledged invasion, Ukraine applied for EU membership, and in June 2023 we already got a candidate status. The process was really swift. On November there was a report of European Commission marking the huge resilience of civil society and government in the event of martial law, and on December the 14th we already got the green light. So we cannot say that it's only because of the wartime and the needs to be more to create kind of wall between the civilized world and the aggressor, because Ukraine started its process to integration, to full integration into the European space soon after its independence. Soon after 2000, we started the process of adoption of our legislation. So here we are absolutely ready to return to the community of European countries. As to the framework of as to the framework of the acknowledgement of civil society in Ukraine itself, I would also mark that in 2023, Ukraine won a special recognition award during the Open Government Summit in Tallinn, and it's kind of truly marks what is happening publicly in our country. Civil society is much invited into the process of decision making. We are providing the expertise, we are providing the hands for the conduction and continuation of the reforms. Volunteering is only a tiny part of what is going on in civil society sector right now, and what is actually remains to be solved here is to ensure that the interests of volunteers, both national and international volunteers that arrive to Ukraine to help to recover already those deliberated territories, to rebuild what was ruined, to help those who remain on occupied and territories and frontline territories. We do appreciate the huge impact of our international partners, international volunteers who arrive, and we would like to create the most favorable conditions for people and our international partners to come. That's why Ukrainian civil society pays huge attention to increasing the professionalization and increasing the institutional capacities of civil society organizations to be able to receive all the financial support, all the human resources support that we need, and we will need many years ahead. We need to strengthen our abilities, and that's what we are actually doing. In the backstage. So just to finalize, I wanted to thank you, the audience of this forum, the speakers, and the nations represented here, for standing with Ukraine, for being strong and for being resilient within your civil society spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your very interesting contribution, and also to Ukraine, because this is the country which keeps on fighting for freedom, and this is the country which actually gave the fresh momentum to the enlargement process. And I think that everyone in this room and those who are online, we are very thankful for that. And last but not least, we have Veronika Cretu, and she will share her actually experience when it comes to the participation of civil society in reforming process. Veronika, let's again stick to 7-minute limit and then allow the audience to contribute. Please, floor is yours.
Many thanks, Vano. Good afternoon or good morning, distinguished panelists, fellow participants. It is indeed unfortunate that I could not join in person. Nonetheless, It is my great pleasure and privilege to join you today in a discussion which is vital and indeed is crucial. So congratulations to the organizers for this timely and relevant event. Very brief about myself. I'm the co-founder of Innovating Governance Association, which is based in Austria, co-founder of the Moldova for EU Diaspora Task Force, currently an OGP envoy, former OGP steering committee member, because OGP was mentioned several times already today. And I'm a former co-chair of the Moldova Open Government Multi-Stakeholder Forum or Coordination Committee. And my colleague, Adrian Ermraki, who is in the room with you today, is my former governmental co-chair of this of the OGP Coordination Committee. So it talks about the collaboration and engagement that we had a few years ago. So the theme of our discussion revolves around multifaceted nature of civil society participation. And it is not only crucial to explore the different formats, because we've heard about the different formats and mechanisms which civil society engages, but also I think it is crucial to understand the underlying dynamics that determine the effectiveness and impact of such participation. And at the heart of this discussion today, we have a fundamental question. How can civil society really best leverage its power, but also its influence in order to be able to navigate the complex landscape of reform? And to answer in brief the questions that you posed, Vano, I think we need days, if not weeks, to respond on those on length. Nonetheless, I will try to reflect based on my personal experiences of being a member of multiple platforms nationally, but also globally, either as a participant or as a lead. And those platforms dealt or still deal with thematic areas of internet governance, domain name system, open government, artificial intelligence, because it was already mentioned today, and gender equality. But let me start from sharing from my Moldova's experiences. Throughout the past decades, Moldova witnessed various forms of civil society engagement, including both organized and ad hoc platforms. And each of these approaches has its unique value and can play a significant role if they are utilized effectively. In Moldova, for example, I want to share about the National Council for Participation. It was a national platform which was designed with a clear mandate and task. It was established by the government as an advisory body. It was operating under a government decision. It used to comprise 30 representatives from civil society, and its role was to really facilitate stakeholder participation in development, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and updating the strategic planning documents. I was a member of this platform for one mandate, and there is a lot of stock taking from that experience. The platform had regular meetings with the Prime Minister and with line ministries. The structure was recognized as credible and able to enhance civil society voices and increase the likelihood of their input being taken into account by policymaking. The platform even got a UN award back in 2010 or 2011. However, it was limited only to 30 representatives. It was heavily donor supported. Its existence came into question when resources were no longer available. And this setup itself generated the perception among the civil society at large that only those within the National Council for Participation were legitimate civil society, potentially excluding other voices from other segments of civil society. Since 2019, there was no significant progress in revitalizing this structure because there were no donors backing up this initiative. At the same time, we had many representatives in civil society opting for a more decentralized mechanism for consultation and engagement, with opting for various sectorial committees and working groups that needed to be established. And today, in the context of Moldova's fulfillment of the European Commission recommendations, one of the recommendations being cooperation with civil society, we can state that the government modified its previous decision to include a regulation mandating the creation of consultative platforms within central public administration authorities to involve civil society in decision-making. Despite the legal framework's establishment, these platforms unfortunately are not yet fully functional, indicating some implementation shortcomings. And a report of the State Chancellery, which was published in April last year, indicates lack of data on civil society organizations' involvement in public consultations and working groups within public authorities. So one key takeaway from this experience is that our countries need organized platforms for civil society engagement. Participation in such platforms can offer legitimacy and recognition on civil society organizations as they are formally recognized stakeholders in the decision-making process. Such platforms, again, speaking from experience, they provide opportunities for capacity building, knowledge sharing, networking among civil society actors. And by participating in such platforms, organizations can enhance their skills, which is extremely important. They can expand their networks, and they can set up alliances with other stakeholders, which gives them the power to strengthen their collective impact and influence. And because the other part of the question related to the ad hoc initiatives, I want to briefly mention my personal experience of initiating and leading the ad hoc Coordination Committee on Open Government. Moldova joined OGP in 2011, and it was only in April 2018 when a formal multi-stakeholder coordination committee or platform was established through a government order. Until 2018, we had a focal point in OGP in the government. However, we did not have a formal structure for dialogue between the government and civil society for co-creating the national action plans on open government. Again, some of the key takeaway from those experiences are that ad hoc initiatives give flexibility and agility in responding to emerging issues. It allows to mobilize quickly, adapt strategies as needed, capitalize on opportunities for advocacy and public engagement. And I did it for about 7 years. And this is an important aspect because ad hoc initiatives rely on the dedication of individual leaders, which can be challenging to sustain without adequate institutional support. And in the absence of formal recognition or resources, sustaining the momentum and engagement may be really difficult. And in addition to this national level structures, be it formalized or ad hoc, we know that civil society is involved in coordination committees, steering committees at regional, but also global levels. They are usually led by international organizations. And these platforms offer civil society organizations opportunities for advocacy, networking, capacity building, cross-sectoral collaboration on issues of regional and global importance. And again, some key takeaway from having been part of global structures is that we need consistent efforts to address challenges of representation, access, and inclusivity to ensure that civil society voices are effectively heard and respected in decision-making processes at all levels. So to summarize on this, I think both organized platforms and ad hoc initiatives play complementary roles. Each format is good as long as it delivers. So what matters most is not the format itself, but the ability to deliver results and address the needs and priorities of stakeholders. Whether formal or ad hoc, the chosen format should be tailored, adjusted to the context and objectives of the engagement process, which should be built on trust and mutual respect. And at the same time, there is no fixed time frame. So what we learned from those experiences is that there is no fixed time frame for how long a platform should exist. Its duration should be guided by its purpose, effectiveness, adaptability, and stakeholder engagement. And for this, what we need in civil society is regular evaluations and assessments that can help us determine whether the platform should continue, evolve, or be phased out based on changing circumstances or emerging needs. On the question of the operational space for civil society, whether it's shrinking, improving, or it remains the same. From my experience, I think it's a continuous roller coaster. It's influenced by a myriad of factors, including legal frameworks, resource availability, political dynamics, and societal attitudes. Again, it is crucial that monitoring the changes in the operational space is happening, and this monitoring requires ongoing vigilance and analysis of legal, political, and social developments, and civil society with organizations with enhanced capacity for foresight, for data analysis, for predictions, are better equipped to adapt to changes in the operational space, whether it's shrinking due to restrictive measures or expanding due to advocacy successes. Another question that we had here was on the emerging challenges. I think there have been already several challenges mentioned about the operation space for civil society, but I want to highlight 3 emerging challenges that today are fundamentally reshaping the landscape of civil society engagement, particularly across our region. Number 1, and Anna has already mentioned, and we know how significant Russia's war in Ukraine is changing the landscape, and it underscored the indispensable role of civil society in responding to humanitarian crisis, in addressing the multifaceted challenges posed by the war, including, as Anna mentioned, countering Russia disinformation, the importance of fact-checking, monitoring, and so on. So we learned that civil society needs to build its capacity to be able to operate in force majeure situations, engage in decision-making processes, and ensure that decisions adopted in such circumstances reflect the needs and realities. Another important challenge that we are facing is the rapid advancement of technologies such as artificial intelligence. Esther mentioned already about their efforts around EU AI Act. And in addition to artificial intelligence, we also witness a widespread adoption of e-governance initiatives, which are significantly transforming the way governments interact with citizens and deliver services. So in the context, going back to AI, why it is important, because in the context of EU AI Act, the upcoming Convention of the Council of Europe on AI, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law, for our countries, it will be incremental that civil society organizations are able to advocate for robust and rights-based AI regulations by analyzing proposed legislation, identifying gaps, and making recommendations to policymakers. They can also highlight the potential social, ethical, and human rights implications of AI technologies and advocate for policies that prioritize transparency, accountability, and fairness. And last but not least is the process of EU integration itself. While EU integration provides a framework for advancing democratic reforms, human rights, and good governance standards, it also requires CSOs to adapt to new regulatory frameworks, engage meaningfully with EU institutions, and advocate for the interests of their constituencies within broader European context. And in Moldova, we have really good experiences and examples of active civil society organizations monitoring robustly the implementation of the 9 clusters of European Commission recommendations. One of those organizations in the room today with you, I mentioned Adriana Yermuraki. So what is important to highlight is also in this context.
Veronica, sorry, if you can
Yes, just last a few seconds. So I wanted to mention that what is important that we keep into account is the emerging opportunities to set up partnerships between this national leading CSOs or think tanks that are monitoring the progress around EU integration and the highly skilled diaspora members, which are based in EU member countries. We piloted a high-level event in November in Vienna as Moldova for EU Diaspora Task Force to share Moldova's advancements in implementation of the recommendations and create the base for exchange, learning and sharing with Austrian-based stakeholders, and continue fostering this collaboration, mutual respect, and reinforcing Moldova's aspiration for EU integration. And I think this kind of exercise is possible to be organized by the trio countries, Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, and really take advantage of our highly skilled diaspora based across the EU member countries. I thank you very much for your time. I look forward to the second round because I still did not mention about some of the success stories and some of the least successful experiences. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but still we have something like 15 minutes for the round of questions and also for other comments from our distinguished panelists. Maybe we turn to the audience now. If there are any comments, any questions, if you just want to raise it, please raise your hand and we can pass you the mic. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll start with the question, maybe to Nona and also to Anna and Veronica. First, I will go to Nona. Nona, you were mentioning the augmenting pressure coming from the Georgian authorities towards the civil society and also towards the donors. It would be very interesting, representing one of the leading civil society organizations here in Georgia. What's your observation? Are the civil society organizations getting self-censored when it comes to this pressure? And do you also feel that the donors are somehow following this pressure and they are getting, less and less kind of, outspoken, supportive, etc., and they just, follow the track of the Georgian authorities? It would be, I think, very interesting to hear your insight on that.
მადლობა ვანო კითხვისთვის. პირველ რიგში მინდა ჩემი შთაბეჭდილება გაგიზიაროთ იმასთან დაკავშირებით, რომ ჩემი აზრით ეს არ არის თავდასხმები სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების და დონორების წინააღმდეგ. ყველა შემთხვევაში ეს არის თავდასხმები მხოლოდ სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების წინააღმდეგ და დონორებთან მიმართებით გაკეთებული განცხადებები კეთდება იმ მიზნით, რომ სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების დაფინანსების სქემები დონორებმა შეცვალონ, ან მხარდაჭერა შეამცირონ და ასე შემდეგ. ანუ ეს ყველაფერი ეკეთდება იმისთვის, რომ სამოქალაქო სივრცე, ოპერირების სივრცე ამ ქვეყანაში თანდათან უფრო დახურული გახდეს. ამას როგორ შეიძლება რომ ჩვენ დაუპირისპირდეთ, ან რა სიგნალები მოდის დონორების მხრიდან? რა თქმა უნდა, ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია ასეთ დროს დონორების მხარდაჭერა, საჯაროდ გაცხადებული და ასევე დახურულ ფორმატებში ხელისუფლებასთან იმაზე საუბარი, რომ ისინი არ გადახედავენ თავიანთ მიდგომებს სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების მხარდაჭერასთან მიმართებით. იმიტომ რომ თუ ეს ასე მოხდა, მაშინ ერთ დღეს ჩვენ მივიღებთ ქვეყანას უცხო ქვეყნის გავლენების აგენტების შესახებ, ან კანონის გარეშე სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების განადგურების მომსწრენი გავხდებით ამ ქვეყანაში. იმიტომ რომ საქართველოში სამწუხაროდ ორგანიზაციებს, არასამთავრობო ორგანიზაციებს ძირითადი დაფინანსების წყარო გვაქვს დონორების მხრიდან და ესე დამოუკიდებლად არსებობა არც ერთ ორგანიზაციას, რაც არ უნდა დიდი იყოს ან მრავალწლიანი მუშაობის გამოცდილება ჰქონდეს, არც ერთს არ შეუძლია საკუთარი თავი დამოუკიდებლად გადაირჩინოს დონორების მხარდაჭერის გარეშე. ამიტომ ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია ასეთ დროს დონორი ორგანიზაციების, საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციების მხარდაჭერა, მისი გაგრძელება, ამის ხაზგასმა საჯაროდაც და დახურულ ფორმატებშიც, რომ ისინი მხარს უჭერენ სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ორგანიზაციების საქმიანობას და ისინი ასე გააგრძელებენ. სხვა შემთხვევაში მართლაც გვექნება რეალობა, როდესაც კანონის გარეშე ფაქტობრივად გაუქმდება სამოქალაქო სივრცე და ორგანიზაციები უბრალოდ ვეღარ შეუძლებთ საქმიანობის გაგრძელებას. ანუ ჩვენი მხრიდან ჩვენ როგორ შეიძლება ამას უპასუხოთ? ჩვენ ვპასუხობთ ისე, როგორც მიგვაჩნია, რომ სწორია. ჩვენ პასუხობთ ისე, რომ ვაგრძელებთ ჩვენ საქმიანობას, სამდენს წეს შეგვიძლია, ვაგრძელებთ მონიტორინგს, ვაგრძელებთ ადვოკატირებას, იმიტომ რომ ეს არის ის ინსტრუმენტები, რომელიც ჩვენ გვაქვს. და ამ გზაზე გავაგრძელებთ იქამდე, სადამდეც ეს შესაძლებელი იქნება ამ ქვეყანაში და იმედი მაქვს, რომ საზოგადოების, როგორც საერთაშორისო, ასევე ქვეყანაში საზოგადოების მხარდაჭერა იქნება ისეთი მტკიცე, როგორც იყო მარტის მოვლენების დროს და რეალურად ჩვენ ყველაზე მთავარი ხმა საქართველოში არის ხალხი, ანუ ადამიანები, რომელიც აღიარებენ ერთმნიშვნელოვნად, რომ სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ორგანიზაციები მათთვის მნიშვნელოვანს ვაკეთებთ. ანუ ჩვენ არ საქმიანობთ ჩვენი საკუთარი ინტერესებისთვის. ეს საქმიანობა, რომელსაც არასამთავრობო ორგანიზაციები ამ ქვეყანაში აკეთებენ, არის საზოგადოებისთვის და ამ მიმართულებით მე მჯერა და ამის მტკიცებულებებიც მაქვს, რომ საზოგადოება მხარს უჭერს იმას, რასაც სამოქალაქო საზოგადოება ამ ქვეყანაში აკეთებს.
If there are any questions from the audience, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, otherwise I'll again try to put the question. I think that this question is is addressed to Veronica and to Anna Isichko and also to Nona. But let's start from Veronica and Anna and then move to Nona. It's about the de-oligarchization. That was one of the preconditions of EU accession process, and all three countries were kind of united with this kind of requirement from the EU side. And we also saw the Venice Commission opinion to apply to the not an individual approach, but to have like more comprehensive and structural approach to that. What's your observation? How these countries like Moldova, like Ukraine, and Georgia were successful when it comes to the fight against oligarchs? Are they defeated, or they still go on there? Please, maybe we start from Veronica and then to Anna and then to Nona.
I will just answer very briefly. No, they are not yet defeated. The fight continues, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done in moving forward.
Thank you, Anna.
I would say that it's kind of the process which will never be defeated. The thing in Ukraine is that most oligarchs which were funded by Russian peace, they mostly faded away, and they are under persecution by our law enforcement institutions and bodies. But there are certain positive changes here, that our anti-corruption and anti-oligarchic structures got stronger, and they got more instruments to fight against oligarchs. We can mark that this year the law in the parliament was successfully voted for the forever PEPs, which was actually enforced and ensures the declaration of mostly influenced by oligarchs people. So here we can see the light at the end of this tunnel. Still, there are some processes that need to be carefully monitored and very scrutinized on behalf of civil society, because there are such trends, and I know that they are the same at the level of European Parliament and European Commission. The trend to regulate lobbyist activity, and it means that sometimes in some jurisdictions it can mention the impact on civil society organizations. We need to be very careful here and understand what is the aim of such regulations. We need to create a framework for regulating lobbyism in order to mitigate the shadow impact of oligarchs. And here we need to be careful not to put administrative burden on, not create some kind of additional tension for civil society organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nona, please, very briefly, and then we go to the sum up the panel.
დეოლიგარქიზაციის ნაწილში ჩვენი სამოქალაქო საზოგადოების ორგანიზაციების შეფასება იყო ის, რომ რეკომენდაცია უნდა შესრულდეს არა რაიმე ესეთი კანონმდებლობის სამოქმედო გეგმის თუ სტრატეგიის შექმნის გზით, არამედ ყველა სხვა დანარჩენი რეკომენდაციის შესრულება ავტომატურად საქართველოს კონტექსტის გათვალისწინებით დეოლიგარქიზაციის შედეგამდე მიგვიყვანდა. ანუ ეს გულისხმობს იმას, რომ თუ გატარდა სასამართლოს რეფორმა, თუ საარჩევნო პროცესები გამჭვირვალედ მიმდინარეობს, დაფინანსება პარტიებს თუ გამჭვირვალეა და ასე შემდეგ, ან თუ ყველა სხვა დანარჩენი საკითხი, რომელიც ახლა 9 ნაბიჯშია თავს მოცემული, ეს ყველაფერი თუ შესრულდა, ეს თავისთავად დეოლიგარქიზაციას გამოიწვევდა. ამიტომ მე მგონია, რომ ეს სწორი მიდგომა, რომელიც ჩვენ გვაქვს და ამ მიმართულებით ადვოკატირებას გავაგზავნებთ.
დიდი მადლობა. So we basically have 5 minutes, even less, and maybe we go back to the panelists, and I would like to ask you to just to sum up in maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, and we should reach the end of our panel discussion today. Maybe we start from Thea again and then go to this order.
Yes, thank you, Vano. Actually, again, I would like to reiterate that it's really delightful to be part of this expert community for these 2 days. And I think these type of platforms and, environments where peers can come together and exchange on what I am observing are the problems that, are cross-cutting to all these countries pretty much. So I think it's very interesting to hear the ways in which all of us deal with the similar problems. And thank you for this opportunity. And I would like to echo actually our distinguished panelist from yesterday from Serbia. I think he made a very important point and recommendation based on the wonderful experience that they have built there for the civil society actors. From the donor community point of view, we are here to support you. We are here to support all the mechanisms, instruments, such as advocacy, such as capacity building, and plethora of instruments that are in place. And we're here to support this, of course. But also it's very important that the civil society also builds this coalition, let's say, mindset around the most important issues. And they also build this, kind of cross-sectoral, let's say, and sustainable effort within their own sector so that they are kind of strong enough then to speak in by one voice, especially on the matters that are so instrumental to our countries in this very important period as we embark on this important. So I think I would like to see more civil society organization representatives in the room and online in future, because I think this is a wonderful opportunity to everyone to enlighten themselves about the mechanisms, tools they can use to make their voices stronger. So I hope to see this more in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tea. Nona, very briefly, please.
მეც ცოტა პოზიტიურად მინდა დავასრულო და თქვა რომ რა თქმა უნდა სამოქალაქო საზოგადოება ყოველთვის მზად არის რაც ამ პანელის სათაური იყოს ჩართულობა რეფორმების მონაწილეობა ჩვენ ყოველთვის მზად ვართ რომ ჩართულები ვიყოთ ჩვენი რეკომენდაციები გავუზიაროთ სახელმწიფო უწყებებს და იმედი გვაქვს რომ პოლიტიკური ნება ხელისუფლების მხრიდანაც თანდათან უფრო გამოიკვეთება და შესაძლებელი გახდება რომ მართლაც გავატაროთ ის რეფორმები რომელიც მნიშვნელოვანია იმისთვის რომ საქართველოს გახდეს დაიწყოს მოლაპარაკებების პროცესი და საქართველოს საბოლოოდ გახდეს ევროკავშირის წევრი ქვეყანა. მადლობა ორგანიზატორებს და ვანო პანელის წამოწყებას.
Mადlova. Now let's turn to our panelists online one. Esther, please, if you can sum up in 1 minute or so.
So it's important to join efforts and benefit from the insights and innovation that civil society can bring to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Anna, please.
Is it for Anna?
There are two Annas.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me, but
there's one N. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I think it has to be stressed out again and again that civil society is part of the solution when it comes to preventing, exposing, and deterring corruption. So our main call is actually to be recognized as partners. And what does it mean in practice? Well, that governments should enable a safe environment for civil society groups to operate. This is absolutely crucial. That they facilitate access to information and that they actively engage with civil society in policy making and in monitoring at the local level or country level, but of course also on CAC implementation reviews and monitoring. And I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maka, please.
Thanks, Vaho. Thanks, the audience for their attention. One final thought would be about the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration, and that's. Of course, there is a role for everyone to play for the government, for civil society organizations. it takes two to tango, but at the same time, here, given the role of the international community and the organizations, I would say that it takes three to tango almost. And it's given the fatigue and the amount of efforts that it takes for civil society organizations to remain active and vocal, and it's very tiring, I could imagine. It's also important that for all of us to find the ways to optimize and to join resources and to find the ways to sort of join forces. And I think that this forum today is also a beautiful opportunity and a good example of sort of joining forces and pushing for reform. So thanks again for your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you, Maka. And Anna, please.
Once again, I would like to thank all the active and responsible people who are building the civil society, and many thanks to DG Forum 2024 for collecting all us, for sharing these experiences. And on behalf of Ukrainian civil society organizations, I wanted to say that we are fully open to share the expertise and best practice that we unfortunately have today, how to deal in the event of fully scaled invasion of crazy neighbor. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Anna. And last but not least, Veronica, please.
Thanks very much. I would like to conclude by saying that it is key to harness diverse platforms for effective engagement, test, pilot, play with various formats, because there is no one size fits all. It is an important continuous effort. Learning fast how to navigate challenges in the context of continuously shifting operational spaces, be it shrinking or expanding, war, artificial intelligence, implementation of EU recommendations, you name it. We need to constantly upgrade our competences, skills, know-how, and be one step ahead. Have the foresight, have capacity for vision setting, and understand innovation for impact, taking advantages of emerging opportunities, embrace innovation, foster collaboration, leverage new tools. Civil society can indeed capitalize on emerging opportunities to shape policy, enhance transparency, and strengthen democratic governance. And finally, when civil society speaks, it's not just noise. It's the sound of democracy in action, amplifying the voices of the marginalized and challenging the status quo. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Veronica, and thanks to everyone. Please join me to extend our appreciation to our distinguished panelists. I think that it was interesting discussion and interesting insights and exchange of experience. So I'll go back to Georgi and maybe he can deliver, action plan for the next steps.
Very much, Vano, first of all, for a brilliant moderation of the panel, and to all presenters for enlightening presentations and your comments to the questions. Well, it's a very, very close topic for me, and I didn't want to interfere myself with the comments, but it is daily discussed among the colleagues in Georgia, and we heard the developments about the civic participation from the candidate countries, and it was quite interesting for me to listen to all the presentations, and I would like to express the gratitude to all of you for the discussion and the presentations. Well, probably this will be something which will be widely discussed in Georgia, particularly in the frames of the implementation of 9 steps, because public participation is challenged a bit in Georgia, and Nona spoke quite and covered this topic quite well. But I will also add that every day we hear criticism toward the civil society from a very high level in Georgia. So I'll stop here. And once again, thank you very much to all of you, and especially to our colleagues who found time to contribute to our to our forum with their presentations and comments online. And as I'm telling to all of the online participants, especially to our dear friends. We look forward to seeing you in Tbilisi next time. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'll... So what we have next, we have two workshops. None of them will be in this room. You can find the exact locations